tearing it down, blowing it up, that is where the fun is in Dynasty. But spinning that round, turning that rebuild into a competitive team, that is the challenge. I'm joined by one of the best Dynasty minds in the business, Matt Price, FF, as you probably know him as the Fantasy Zookeeper from DLF, to tell us how we can turn that rebuilding team and start to inch our way up the leaderboard and turn it into a true contender. Matt, thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good, man. SFB 15 is rolling. We got Dynasty auctions or free agent auctions things going. Bitcoin's at all-time highs. Things are good, man.
Awesome. It is, yeah, it's certainly busy season. It feels like there's new drafts kicking off every day, all these charity leagues, everything like that. It's a wonderful time of year. But yeah, I've brought you on, and as we were talking beforehand, I sort of left it a little bit cryptic. I want to have a meandering conversation as we walk through the kind of the world of Dynasty. And everyone knows how to rebuild, everyone knows how to kind of tear it down and what to do. But I want to start talking about how to turn that table around, how to start kind of building your way back up the leaderboard, shall we say. Now, when you're looking to do this, do you have in your mind any sort of time scale, how long a rebuild should take before you're starting to spin it round, or is that roster dependent? Is it league dependent? Where are you at with that?
Yeah, it's tough because like everything in Dynasty, it depends, right? It depends on your rebuild. Are you focusing heavily on picks? Are you on draft picks and you're actually making those draft picks, or using those draft picks as capital to go out and get players to compete immediately? I've done it both ways. It just depends on, do you want to slow roll it and kind of try to build that monster, or do you want to get in there and really maybe you don't have the best team in the league after a year. But you're able to squeak into the playoffs and maybe squeak out a championship that way, and then just continue the build going forward like that. I would say my ideal is to kind of do a combination of the two. Like, I'm really looking to, maybe year one after the rebuild, I'm not quite the playoff team, but I'm really heading that direction. I'm just making moves to scoop value where I can. Maybe that first year, especially once you get towards the playoffs, the true contenders in the league are really looking to make some moves to make that final push, so you can maybe flip some pieces to them to add some more to your back end youth to just kind of continue churning that roster over. But by year two, post rebuild, I'm really looking to at least make the playoffs, and then by year three, I'm really looking to push for that title. So typically, I would say like it's a 2 to 3 year maximum window before I'm looking to be strong competitive. But I do think you can do it in other ways too. I think you can certainly be competitive enough to win in the first year after a rebuild, just depending on what kind of assets you have to flip and what your league mates are kind of looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And, sometimes you get lucky with a draft pick or a trade you make or something like that, and it accelerates everything. I think for me, I wrote an article for DLF probably 2-3 years ago now, and it was in it. I said about, I don't believe any rebuild should take longer than a year, like 12 months, I think. And I got quite a lot of pushback on that. And I think people viewed that as you should go from nothing to winning a league in 12 months. That wasn't what I meant by that. What I mean is basically what you just laid out, is that a rebuild process should be about looking to exit and how am I taking those steps and how am I turning myself into a contender. It shouldn't just be, I don't want any player that scores points. I want as many picks as I can for 3-4 years, and then I'll have this monster team, because I don't think that ever kind of plays out like that. To me, as soon as you're entering a rebuild, you should almost have your exit plan. And I think that for me, that exit plan is really clear in terms of, have you got 2 or 3 cornerstone pieces that you want to build around? That might not necessarily be players. It could be picks or, things like that. That's where you want to build around. And then, as you said, the rest of those roster spots, you almost need to churn. You need to be super active. You need to be, acquiring players off the waiver wire and spin them off in trades, but all the while assuming more kind of roster value to start creeping you up that overall kind of roster value and start getting you there. Now, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, the word that you mentioned there, being active, that phrase, like, that is the most important part, I would say, of a rebuild. Like, nobody is going, I can't say that nobody is going to come to you looking for pieces, but that's going to be much less frequent, I would argue, unless you just have a couple of players that are very, very attractive at that particular point in time, right? You really need to be out there, maybe sending offers daily, if not daily, at least weekly, right? You need to be engaged with your league. You need to be talking to everybody, finding out what every team in your league is looking to do, just so that you have enough information so that you can make the best decision with the assets that you do have on your roster. So you really need to be plugged in, make sure everybody, you know exactly what every team in the league is trying to do, because there's no use of looking at, you know, you may look at another squad. We've done this. I'm sure we've all done this many times, where we look at a squad and we're like, I don't think that team is competing this year, but that team really, really, truly thinks that they're going to win the title this year. So you really need to kind of be on the same page with what your trade partners are wanting to do with their squad. And that, as everything in Dynasty, information is everything. And the more information you have about each team and their direction is going to help you in that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where, you know, it's just dive into people's DMs, you know, have those conversations, be asking questions. What do you think you're going to do this year? Are you looking to compete? Are you looking to rebuild? Just be asking those questions, because as you said, information is everything. And quite frankly, people will tell you, you know, if they are, you know, if they think they can win a title, everybody's got a bit of an ego. They're going to tell you that. They're not going to be like, oh no, maybe we'll aim for the mid-table and see how it goes.
Right.
No, nobody's aiming for that. Nobody's trying to achieve that. If they're pushing for a title, they will absolutely let you know and look to do that. So when we're starting to climb out of the rebuild phase, are you willing to acquire kind of win now veterans? Say you've been in your rebuild for a year, you've got 2 or 3 kind of young cornerstone pieces, you know, maybe a Malik Neighbors and a Ashton Genty or something like that. Are you looking to and open to acquiring a kind of back end of career win now asset like a Christian McCaffrey or an AJ Brown, maybe trading future first round picks to do so? Or do you think that's getting too aggressive and you would rather kind of stick the course with your younger core as such?
I'm not sure I would ever move a first round pick for those kinds of players, but I think we, you know, every NFL season is different, of course, but I think we learned last season that formerly, I guess we could still call them elite, I guess, but aging elite running backs, sometimes they stay healthy all season long, right? So last season, I think you could have picked up players like Alvin Kamara, for example, for second round picks, players like that have a chance for you to be able to flip for a first once you get closer to the playoffs, when teams are more desperate for production on their roster. Like, those are the types of moves I would make for veterans. That said, you know, like there anything could happen in an NFL and a dynasty season. Maybe you're planning on a rebuild, but you know, it's week 8 and you're 6-2, and all of a sudden you're like, you know, maybe I can make a push this season. So you just have to kind of have your tap dancing shoes on a bit. So yeah, I'd say I'd be willing to make moves for those veterans players, but not necessarily for premium capital like a first round pick. Whereas if I was a competing team, I might be willing to make that move once we get to like week 12, week 13, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I think the thing I'd add to that is that I love when rebuilding teams or teams that are looking to come out of the rebuild take advantage of desperation from other owners. And I feel like we see this every year in the off season where, you know, there's certain players that almost get the stink on them in terms of nobody wants to touch them because that's it, they're done. You know, like I've seen Travis Kelce go for like a third round pick and stuff like that in some leagues, like certain players where it's like they've only got a year left, they've got the stink, no one touches them. And everybody sits there kind of just staring at it. And it's like, actually, do you know what? If you're in that situation, that's the perfect kind of player. As you said, someone like an Alvin Kamara for a second, where, okay, if the price is right, and the price has got to be right, because I don't want to pay anything of a premium for it. But if you can get them on the cheap, knowing that come September, you can potentially spin them off for a profit, I think that's a great move. And I think in a rebuilding situation where you're trying to kind of get back towards that, you need to assume some risk. And I think that, to me, the quickest way to accelerate that rebuild is to assume some risk. Worst case scenario, if it blows up in your face, you've lost nothing. Maybe you've, you know, added a few months onto your rebuild kind of thing. But best case scenario, if you take a risk on a player that pays off handsomely and suddenly they're worth twice as much, you've accelerated your rebuild significantly and you can reap those rewards. So do you become, in this situation where we're kind of coming out of a rebuild, do you look to acquire more risk than you would as a contending team, or does your kind of risk profile stay the same?
I would say, oh man, that's a tough question. I could really, no, not at all. Like, I'm just kind of filing through my teams, like from last year, especially. Like, gosh, just like, this is such an answer that I feel is such a cop out, but like, again, it just kind of depends on the squad. Like, I can totally see a scenario where like, I'm willing to be more risky as a contender because this is it. Like, I have McCaffrey, I have Kamara, I've got some of the older productive wide receivers. I got AJ Brown, like players like this that are, approaching that age cliff. And this is kind of my window. And I need to make a decision. Am I going to push right now and maybe give up a future fit first for a player that maybe is not quite that, or maybe it's worth it right now for the next 4 weeks, but it's not going to be worth that as soon as this season is over. So in that case, like I maybe feel like I would be more risky as a contender. But that said, like as a rebuilder, like you said, like if you're already in the midst of the rebuild, you've already starting to build up those young kind of cornerstone pieces of your squad. Maybe those are the untouchable pieces, but maybe you're willing to play more fast and loose with your second round picks, with your maybe your prospects that you're really interested. Maybe like a Cam Scatterbo. I like Cam Scatterbo, and people are excited about him. But maybe this year is not quite the year for him, and you're willing to move those players for an aging veteran. Maybe you're willing to move those younger prospects that we're not quite sure are going to be cornerstone pieces for those aging veterans. So I could kind of see it from both perspectives, but I guess I might be willing to be a little bit more risky when I am actually ready to push for that title.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because I'm probably the reverse, in that I think when I'm at what I class as like a true contender, I'm trying to remove risk and become as kind of secure as possible almost. I think that, so if a few guys that I'll throw out here in terms of like a Breece Hall, Chase Brown, Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, I think if I'm a contender, I'm almost nervous to have those guys on my team, because I'm viewing those as risks, and I'd look at, can I pivot to a similar player? Can I move from Jalen Waddle to Devonta Smith, or can I move from Jalen Waddle to Terry McLaurin, something like that I view as a maybe doesn't have the truly elite ceiling that Jalen Waddle has, top 10 overall seasons as a rookie and a sophomore, but feels a bit more safer. Whereas I think as a coming out of a rebuild situation, I think I would lean towards taking that swing and assuming the risk, because if it pays off, great. I might have a chance to contend in year one after my rebuild. If it blows up in my face and Jalen Waddle, has a similar season like he has the last two, it's not really cost me anything. I wasn't expecting to be a contender. It just means I've pushed it another year down the road as such.
I guess where I'm maybe we're saying kind of the same thing, as I'm not sure, but how I operate with contenders, especially down the stretch, is I want to consolidate all of my resources into the best possible starting lineup that I have. And that's a very risky move, because maybe I've piled everything. I have 10 locked in starters. And then the first week of the playoffs, I lose one or two of those players to injury. Now I have, 8 spots in my starting lineup, and I've got to scramble to find 2 starters that I can plug in that I'm hopefully confident are going to score a little bit of points. So from the risk aspect, I'm taking it to the extreme, and I'm consolidating all of those assets, all of those resources into that starting lineup for the stretch run, if that makes any sense. Whereas as a rebuilder, I'm trying to cast these wide nets. I'm trying to build I have 12 different shots at hitting on a future stud, that kind of thing. So
that makes
I'm not sure if we're saying the same thing there, but I guess that's where I would come from, as being more of a risk, not quite as risk averse when I'm contending, because I want to consolidate all of that.
No, that makes complete perfect sense. So let me throw another hypothetical at you then, Matt. So you're coming out of your rebuild. You've maybe you lucked out in the draft last year. You've got Jaden Daniels. You've got maybe it's super flex league. Your second quarterback is JJ McCarthy. Maybe you're lacking a little bit there. You've got an okay rest of your team, but Jaden Daniels is really your kind of your golden goose. In that situation where you're not quite in contending, you're looking to come out of that rebuild phase. Are you holding on to Jaden Daniels, or are you potentially cashing him in for, I don't know, let's say Cam Ward and what would you need? 2 firsts? Or so that you're spreading that asset base, or would you hold on to that kind of golden goose?
I think given that specific scenario, like I'm probably holding on to Jaden Daniels. Like I highly covet those rushing quarterbacks, especially the young ones, as my most valuable pieces on dynasty rosters, and I don't really want to let go of those. If we were to pivot position to say, like this year for somebody like Ashton Genty, I might be more inclined to move a piece like that for multiple pieces. And I probably wouldn't do it before, like right now, before the season starts. I'm probably going to wait to see if he can build some value, and I know there's people that say, well, he's already at his ceiling value wise or whatever, but we know that that's not necessarily true. If he comes out in week 1 and has 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, I think it's a very likely scenario that people move him immediately up to running back 1 in their rankings, right? So yeah. I think positionally speaking, I probably wouldn't do that with someone like Jaden Daniels, but I might do it with somebody I don't know, like who's the top young pocket passer, like a Joe Burrow or something like that. But that rushing aspect and the combined with the youth is something that, like in that particular scenario, I probably would just hold on to my asset.
No, that makes sense. So if I came for you with Jaden Daniels for Cam 1, 2 first, it's probably a no. But if I came to you and said, you've got Ashton Genty, you took him 101 this year, but I'll give you Omarion Hampton and a future first, you're probably more interested in that sort of move.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And so looking ahead at those future picks then, how willing are you to move those? If you're coming out of this rebuild, maybe you've got a couple of future firsts in your back pocket. At what point are you willing to kind of cash those in? Do you need to be a true contender to do that? Or would you potentially look at cashing some of those in to help accelerate that rebuild slightly?
I would probably not make a move like that until I have a good idea of what my current season is going to look like. Like I don't think I'm going to make those moves now unless it's just a total overpay for something, right? Like I really want to know the direction of my team. Maybe it's 4 weeks, maybe it's 6 weeks, whatever it is that I feel comfortable with. And again, when I'm truly competing, I want to consolidate all that talent. So I'm probably going to want 6 to 8, locked in players that I feel really good about for the current season before I'm willing to move those first round picks, because, I want to be able to add 1 to 2 very good players for the run in that kind of scenario. So I'm going to be a little bit more hesitant. I think I'm always going to be a little bit more hesitant to move the first in a rebuild situation until I truly know the direction of my team for the current season.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. I think I'm trying to think. I think it might have been Ryan McDowell that came on here probably 18 months, 2 years ago and said, if you're a true contender, you shouldn't need to trade away future capital at the beginning of the season in order to contend.
True.
If you're having to do that, the truth is you're not a real contender. You're likely a mid-table team. And with Dynasty, the beauty is that once you get to normally kind of like what week 6, week 8, week 10, something like that, half the league's not trying to compete. You can very much backdoor into the playoffs. And at that point, then if you've got that future capital, if you get to week 10 and you're a 4 seed and you're thinking, actually, if I sent across these 2 firsts, maybe get 1 absolute superstar, that can catapult me into kind of true contender. That's the thing. But if you're sitting there at week 8 and saying, oh, I'm sort of the 8th seed or something like that, what are you doing trading away future capital to just try and push you a little bit? If you're a true contender, you shouldn't need to try and compete, because it's not redraft. In redraft, 12 teams are trying to win the league. In Dynasty, it's normally only 4 or 5 teams that are actually genuinely trying to win the title at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I mean, trust me, as somebody who whenever I'm competing, I probably undervalue my first round picks. Like if I can go get George Kittle for a first round pick and I'm a contender except for tight end, I've been known to do things like that. But I will tell you, nothing feels worse than thinking you're a contender before the season starts. You move your first round capital and you start out like 2-7, and all of a sudden that first round pick that you moved is like the 103. Like, there is no worse feeling for me in Dynasty than that. So I try very hard, unless I'm just pretty convinced. I mean, I've even done it this season. I said I was going to not trade as many draft picks this time. I'm going to hold on to them this year, but I have certainly broken that rule on certain teams where, like, I already have 10 or 11 great starters, and I have a chance to add another one, but again, even those scenarios can go completely upside down by mid-season. So I mean, for the I don't want to say less experience, but for somebody who's maybe starting their first rebuild, second rebuild, something like that, absolutely hold on to those picks until it's time to pounce and enter the playoffs and be a true contender, because that is a terrible feeling to see what you thought might be the 110 to 112 become the 103. Like, that's just a scenario that you do not want to be in as a rebuilder.
Do you project future picks when you're making trades like that? Do you view a certain pick as, this is going to be the 101 to 103 next year, or things like that, or do you treat them all as kind of random future firsts?
I treat them as random until we get to say, I think week 4 is when I kind of start evaluating, and of course there's still a long season to go after that, but maybe you extend that to week 5 or 6 now that we play more games. But I think by absolute maximum of mid-season, you should know where your team is headed, what direction you're going, and also maybe have a good idea of what the other teams are doing. And of course, all of a sudden somebody could wake up mid-season after not being that active, and all of a sudden make a bunch of trades and change the complete landscape of your league, right? But ideally, I think most experienced Dynasty players are, by mid-season, are making that decision. So I kind of like to jump that a little bit by week 4 to 6, like, I really want to make a decision what I'm doing with this team, take a look at the league, and make a projection of where I think that they're going to finish, just so I have a better idea of where those picks might land for the following rookie draft.
I absolutely love that, because that's exactly my process as well. Is that I get really frustrated and annoyed when I get asked trades that are projecting picks 18 months, 2 years out, maybe even 3 years out, and this is going to be the a late pick because I'm going to contend in 3 years' time.
Oh, no way.
It drives me mad. I have the exact same rule. So I've got my trade values in my trade chart that's we have available to all our members in Discord, and that's exactly that. After week 4, I go from being random to early, mid, late first round picks. Second and thirds are all still kind of random values. So yeah, it's interesting that we're very similar in our mindset in terms of how we're valuing those future picks. And that is it. Perfect. Well, thank you ever so much, Matt, for coming on and walking us through kind of that spinning round, how to exit that rebuild and how to kind of push towards that contention rate. Remind everyone that is watching, where can they find you? Where can they find your work?
Yeah. I hope that was helpful. I mean, it's just really hard without, like, the examples that you give and the scenarios that you play out is really helpful for kind of figuring out what kind of advice you're going to give, because again, everything depends on what your current state of your league and your roster and your settings and all that stuff is. So hopefully that was helpful for everybody. All of my stuff was, of course, over at Dynasty League Football. You can check us out on the DLF Dynasty podcast with myself, Ryan McDowell, and Dan Myler. You can follow me on X at Matt Price FF. Blue Sky is, I think, Matthew Price Sky, something like that. But yeah, thank you so much, Rich. It's always a blast coming to the sanctuary and chopping it up with you.
No, beautiful. Thank you so much for jumping on, and I look forward to next time already.